Okay, for 600 to 1450, the first phase that we started off in world history studying, this is AP period 3, we have one more area of the world to discuss, and that's the Americas. So particularly we're going to look at Mesoamerica and then South America. So if you remember, when I was teaching this section to you, I chose to actually bump this into the next two chapters. The reason being I wanted you to see what's going to be the impact of European exploration on these regions. However, for the midterm review, I want to review this as part of the 600 to 1450 material because that's time-wise where it belongs. And then in the next map, 1450 to 1750, we'll be coming back to this area, but then just specifically looking at the impact of colonization on the Americas. So let's begin. We have the Aztecs and the Mayas on this map showing Mesoamerica. Remember, who comes first? The Mayan civilization. So we're going to be beginning down here with the material on the Maya. And if you remember, the Maya have two phases to their development. First phase of the Mayan civilization was down in the interior near Tikal. So Tikal is the major city-state. And what types of trade goods are they utilizing in this part of the world? We're talking about feathers, animal skins, cacao, obsidian, and jade. So very similar to everything else, we're talking about luxury goods. And this is a good time in this video, because this is going to be shorter, to discuss the three different types of goods or levels of trade goods that exist in the world at this point in time. You have local trade goods. These are necessities, things you need immediately, you do not have time to wait for, or things that are perishable, that they don't do well on long trips. So that's the first stage, the local trade goods. And at this point in world history, local trade goods account for by far the majority of things that are being traded in the world at this point in time. Then in the middle, we have intermediate trade goods. Intermediate trade goods are goods that are going to be transported over a bit longer distances. But the reason for that is because of the nature of the good itself, and that it has this thing called value added. Now, what does that mean? These intermediate trade goods are are raw materials, which in and of themselves don't have that much value to justify the cost of shipping them over these long distances. But once they are processed, then the value you can get out of that processed good added to the original value of the good makes it enough that it's going to justify taking these chances and transporting these goods over longer distances. And then finally, so you have local, intermediate. Finally, you have luxury goods or long distance trade goods. And as I indicated already there, long distance trade goods are always luxury items, so things that you can get a huge profit from the sell of. But at the same time, they have to be things that are fairly lightweight and small. Otherwise, it would be too expensive to ship them over these long distances. So if you look here, the Maya trade goods, almost all of them that I have listed here, feathers, skins, cacao, obsidian, jade, these are all luxury trade goods. So we do have trade diasporas here as well, but they're on a slightly smaller scale than what we saw in the old world. And keep in mind why that is. The old world is much more latitudinal, so things can be easily moved from one geographic zone to another because they're along the same latitude. Here in the Americas, though, being so much longitudinal north-south, environmental factors kind of get in the way of the movement and transplant of these goods up and down because they're not at the same latitude, and therefore geographically they're not at the same growing they're not in the same growing zones, ecological zones. So first phase of Maya, you have Tikal, it's in the interior, and most of your trade routes are in the interior of the Yucatan Peninsula, so all in and around here. Second phase of Mayan civilizations, the Maya move out toward the coast of the Yucatan. So this is the second phase. Chichen Itza is its major trade city at this point. It's trading in cotton, honey, salt, so some goods that are luxuries, but others that are more intermediate trade goods. And notice what happens to the trade routes. They maintain all the interior ones, but they add the coastal trade routes as well. And very similar to the Indian Ocean, you're seeing the type of coastal shipping vessels that we saw there. Socially and politically, you want to know that the Maya civilization was a confederation of city-states, and that is definitely a weakness because you have this kind of internal competition and power struggle that is always going to be there, and leave the confederation vulnerable to breaking up. The other thing you want to know about the Maya is that women had become leaders, and even though there was patriarchy, women in the Americas did have some roles to play. Next, after the Maya civilization, then we see that declining, and civilization kind of moves a little bit to the north, so into what is today modern-day Mexico. Some things you want to know about the Aztec. Remember, they're also called the Mexica people. Their city-state is Tenochtitlan. Agriculturally, they're using chinampas. If you remember, those were the kind of floating gardens that they had developed. The water channels in between all of the growing plots allowed for fertilization, also hydration. So it was really good for all of those things. Trade-wise, they're tapping into, as you can see here, I have Mayan goods. They're tapping into all of these older trade routes. So those continue to be part of the Mayan civilization, but they're also extending some of the trade routes further north into the southern part of what is today the United States. From those trade routes, they're gaining access to turquoise, a semi-precious stone, and pyrite, which they're using to make into mirrors, among other goods. Socially and politically, just like the Maya, women have a fairly good position in society. There are certain things, of course, that they were prohibited from doing, but the education system, women were highly educated, and you saw women having a very important role in Mayan society as well. Also, similar to the Maya civilization, Aztec civilization is a confederation of city-states. Now, granted, it's a more developed confederation of city-states than what you saw with the Maya, but it's still not approaching a full-blown empire. You still have city-states who are dominating for a period of time, others who are going to be challenging that. And once again, just like the Maya, the city-state structure is vulnerable because, once again, you have this built-in competition among the city-states themselves. And of course, this is going to be taken advantage of by the Spaniards when they come over. And in the next series of maps, we'll discuss that further. Finally, when speaking about trade diasporas, which is the concept that dominates this entire period, we have to bring up the fact of the Pozteca. Now, remember, Pozteca was a trade diaspora among the Aztecs. They were similar to the trade diasporas in the Old World in that they shared a common religion. Quetzalcoatl was the god who was mostly worshipped among those people. Also, like your trade diasporas in the Old World, they were somewhat separate from the rest of community. They could operate by their own rules. They conducted trade over long distances. But an interesting aspect that's being added here to the Pozteca is they were also serving as spies for the Aztec leadership. As they went into other city-states to sell goods, they were also a prime group to be able to collect information because merchants would always be welcome. Merchants were always a part of society, and people would have had their guards down and they would have had access to a lot of conversations that might prove pertinent for the Aztec leadership to know. So the Pozteca also served as spies. So that is North America prior to European colonization. Let's go down and take a look at South America. So if you remember that in South America, we have the main civilization being the Inca. And the Inca, unlike what you saw in Mesoamerica, so unlike the Maya, unlike the Aztec, the Inca are a full-blown empire. So it's much more consolidated power within one dynasty, so a family dynasty, changing hands from father to son and so forth. Remember, that will be a weakness because the form of empire that the Inca had did not include a huge bureaucracy, so that once the leader was taken out or weakened, the empire couldn't really function on its own without that leader. So it's a specific form of empire that's going to be created that the power is very much concentrated just in that one person at the top. A couple other things to remember about the Incan Empire that are significant. The road system that is developed. The region of South America that you see here, so Peru, parts of Bolivia, down into Chile, Argentina, very, very mountainous. So you have roads connecting across these mountains into an extensive roadway system, not unlike what you saw in Rome last year. So that's a good comparison. Rome, Incan Empire, both had expansive systems of roads. And in the Incan Empire, these will go across the mountains, but also up and down. And they also constructed these huge bridges going across these expansive valleys in between these mountains. How did they build all of this? Because it was quite extensive. They had developed a system that was based on kinship and family. So villages are centered around families and extended kinship groups. This is called ayu. And those families would each then take a turn, or those villages, those families would take a turn at working for the empire. And keep in mind, everyone benefited from this because the roads facilitated the movement of goods and supplies and things like that. So from this came the mita system as it existed under the Incan Empire. Mita system literally meant taking a turn at work. This is how they built all of the roads, all of the bridges, all of the extensive infrastructure that they had in the Incan Empire, which was highly advanced. And the entire society benefited from this. So this is a good example of government control of economics and of taxation through work, through labor, that actually was a system that many people bought into because it was a benefit to all. The last thing you want to remember about the Incan Empire before European involvement was that the geography, so the environment, determined how things were being manufactured and how trade would occur. And because of the environment being so mountainous, you see something entirely different developing here. So here they have the vertical trade, which was trade up and down the mountains, not over huge expanses of geography. So unlike other regions, the geographical scope was quite limited. So we're talking about just this area here. But the differentiation among the goods came from being either on the tops of the mountains, on the sides of the mountains, or down in the valleys. So here you can see a picture. Certain crops were being produced down in the valleys, the lower level, lower elevations. On the mountainside, you had other goods being produced. They were being grown in a terrace system, very similar to China. And then at the top, you had a lot of the manufactured goods, gold products, things like that being produced. Go back and just refresh your memory of what types of goods were being produced in each ecological zone. But you want to know that trade in the Incan Empire was different. It did not happen across large regions. It happened up and down the mountains. So the mountains themselves designated the different ecological zones, which would then have goods traded back and forth up and down the mountains. So that is vertical trade. And that is the end of our maps for 1600 to 1400. For 600 rather to 1400, period 3 in AP World History. We'll come back with period 4, which is 1450 to 1750, the period of European exploration, and the way that the rest of the world is responding to it.